a really good question. Can you just repeat the question for the sake of the recordings that you had that you texted me? What was your
Yeah.
first question?
Yes. Okay. Wait. Uh, I'm going to read it. So, uh, okay. What are some common misunderstandings about biomechanics that you notice with beginners or even experienced trainers? How to
Yes.
do?
So
Okay.
that's such a good question because it answers your very first one, how to make everybody happy and not feel like a failure as a coach in a class. So
Okay.
you can choose a main joint. I'll leave it up to you. You want to do shoulder or hips? We can't do both because it's going to take too long. Choose one of them, hips or shoulders.
Shoulders.
Okay, sweet. Let's go with shoulder. All right. So whenever you go into class, your main job is to teach people the skill of tension and the skill of position. So people should know, okay, which muscles should I be using to bring bones in a certain position? That's the only job as a coach, right? And be nice and humble and all the other kind of stuff. But your main principle of coaching is where do bones need to move, like your body, your joint, and which muscles should do the main job. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Let's take the shoulder. What are the big bones, the main parts of the shoulder? What can move in the shoulder or around the shoulder? What's your best guess?
While humerus is moving, scapula is stabilizing clavicle also.
Okay.
So the
Hmm.
most movement come from the arm, so humerus joint, upper joint.
Yeah, exactly. So let's sum it up. So there's a couple of big bone structures. Some move more than others. So there's I don't use Latin words because nobody understands them. So the humerus is
Yeah,
the big arm bone, right?
yeah,
So you have the big arm bone, you have the scapula, you have the clavicular, the collarbone, and you have the rib cage. And it's everything's kind of connected with each other, right? So the
yeah.
first thing is those things need to move somewhere when you do a press or a pull up or a push up or when stuff's happening in your shoulder. All right, cool. So those bones need to be moved according to however an appropriate pull up or push up should look like, right? Sweet. There's two major things that I want you to realize about the shoulder. Um, the first one is I define it as movement in your shoulder and movement with your shoulder. So what does it mean? Think about your scapula, right? So you use scapula, you can retract, protract, so move in, move out, move up, or move down. That's basically all things that your scapula can do, right?
Yeah.
Sweet. Your arm bone, the big arm bone, yeah, you can do a lot of movement with your big arm bone, which automatically leads to movement in your scapula. But the shoulder itself can move very little. So what do I mean by that? So the arm, the big arm bone can move, the scapula can move, you can raise your shoulder, so your collarbone can move a little bit, your rib cage can obviously tilt forward and backwards. But the shoulder itself, like the whole structure of the shoulder, like you can reach out and pull it back, but that's as far as it goes with the shoulder, right? And now compare this to your hips. Like your hips as a structure can move like way back, like think about descending in a squat, and can move forward. That your shoulder can do, right?
Okay.
So that's a basic principle. I'm looking at when I think about training a shoulder. Then there's only two movement patterns that a shoulder can do, right? You can move your shoulder blades together or away. That's it. So whenever you pull, what happens with your shoulder blades?
Uh, one more time, please.
Whenever you do a pulling movement, what
Yeah.
is supposed to happen with your shoulder
Yeah,
blades?
you put it together, like
Exactly.
put it
So
together.
exactly. So fancy word retraction, or you just bring them
Yeah,
in, right? What happens when you do a push? Now think about a push-up, like top position of a push-up. So you push yourself off the
protraction.
floor. How does the top position in terms of your scapula look like um, from your point of view?
Like protraction, like pushing away.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's the two extremes of your shoulder. That's the only thing that can happen with your shoulder blades. One extreme is they're protracted, and the other extreme is retracted. And then there's one thing in the middle, right? So in between protraction and retraction is what I call a neutral shoulder,
Okay.
right? So what is a neutral shoulder? So when you're just standing and you're just letting your arms hang, that's a neutral shoulder position. So your shoulder blades are neither retracted nor protracted. That's your
Okay.
natural shoulder position. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So going back to the class, whenever there's a shoulder movement, that's all I'm thinking about in terms of position,
Okay.
right? So what of those three positions, like neutral shoulder, retraction, and protraction, which position do I need? Okay, that I can see. I can see if your scapula is retracted, protracted, or somewhere in between. Make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Sweet. But that's where most coaching happens in most gyms out there, right? So positional coaching. You're looking at somebody and you can see stuff moving, displacing, being in the right position. That's a skill of position that we're teaching. What most people or most gyms or most coaches are missing is the second skill, which is the skill of tension. So which muscle is bringing that scapula together? Like what makes the shoulder blades retract? What makes the shoulder blades protract? What keeps the shoulder in a neutral position? And that's what we're focusing on in at Greg's gym, is combining those two things. Because
Okay.
being in a position happens with words. You just say, okay, so squeeze your shoulder blades, that's fine. But I'm more interested in, okay, can you activate your lat dorsi in a pull-up to keep your shoulder blade retracted when you do the pull-up? That's the only thing I care about. So going back to your question, how can I make everybody happy and everybody's shoulder happy in a group setting? It's super simple. You just have to know two things. Which exercise am I doing? Let's take the pull-up. What does the position need to look like from start to end? And which muscle brings the bones from starting position to the end position? That is movement. That's it.
Okay. That's really super simple. Yeah.
It is. It is super simple, but
But
it's hard to coach.
it sounds super simple. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it is really, really good point. To focus on people on just on like a small thing, what is actually bring the result.
Exactly. So I came up with this because there's so much stuff that goes in there, like whether it's intensity or volume or sets or reps or percentages or grip. Yeah, that's all true. But if the skill of position and the skill of tension is not there, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
So as a younger coach or as a newer coach or as a less experienced coach, whatever, that's the only two things you should care about,
Okay.
right? So we can step away from, okay, regressing or progressing exercises for people towards, okay, what's the lowest hanging fruit for everybody in that class, so I can see people doing this. For example, when everybody's doing a pull-up, getting their shoulder blades together and using their lats. Let's take the pull-up as an example. What happens, especially for the ladies, what happens for the ladies when they do pull-ups in terms of position? What do you see if somebody actually can pull themselves up?
Yeah, well, they have a struggle pulling them up.
Yeah, but what's the position look like? What happens? We talked about
Yeah,
shoulder position, right? What
shoulders
happens with the shoulder?
maybe are a little bit uh like in protraction. Like
Exactly. So when most ladies or weaker people, it's not only ladies, there's also
yeah,
a lot of weak men out there nowadays, is when you pull up, what you see is you see the shoulder rolling forward, the
yeah,
shoulder going up, shoulder rolling forward, and your shoulder blades going out to the sides, which is protraction, right?
yeah.
So this is the opposite of what we want to see. And that's my job, and that's why I'm writing the book, is Okay, yes, technically this is a pull-up. But in my world, this is not a pull-up because we're not practicing the skill of position, as we talked about before, and we're not practicing the skill of tension. So the
Okay.
bones are moving in the wrong direction, and the big muscles are not firing. So yes, it looks like a pull-up. If I see a pull-up with rounded shoulders doing this,
Yeah.
I know that person has no clue about how to use the lats in a pull-up. And I'm not taking away the fact, the celebration that you just did a pull-up. That's awesome and great. But we need a teachable skill, teachable tool to practice and give people pull-ups, like guaranteed pull-ups. And doing this will probably get you to like 1, 2, or 3 pull-ups, for sure, to shoulder pain, because that's not how the shoulder is supposed to move in the pull-up. But you're just going to hit a plateau at some point. You're never going to do 10 pull-ups or 15 pull-ups or pull-ups with weight using that position and that tension ever. And that's all I care about.